Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And as you can hear, it's reflective of today's podcast, which is the real deal, what 7 years of podcasting with kids looks like. I want to add it in a really there. What it really looks like.
This wasn't the podcast we were planning to record tonight. However, like 7 years of podcasting requires you to do, we pivoted because I have a very sick 3-year-old with a virus and she wants nobody but me. And we had hit record and it became very clear that I wasn't going to be able to do this without her in my lap. So here we are. And we thought, well, in fact, this week is the anniversary of our launch of our podcast 7 years ago. So what better time to reflect on what it's looked like to show up 52 weeks a year for 7 years.
Happy birthday to us.
Yeah. And so I guess, Julie, what are your most memorable memories, I guess, over that time?
Oh, God, I can't even remember. God. Do you know, I actually think the most memorable memory was you, I wanted to say asking, I'm like, it wasn't so much asking, it was more like, if you want this bad enough, you'll find a way to do it. It was like this straight up hard talk. And I was like at the time going, will I? I don't think I can, you know, and I still reflect on that often because of course the words you spoke were completely and utterly true. Of course they were. And yet when you're meeting that same sentence, and I think that we all meet it over and over in our life continuously, but it's the thing in the mindset that you're pretty sure is concrete and can't change. It feels really brutal to go, it's even possible to change.
Yeah, it almost feels like this is what I must have said to you. I don't recall it, but I must have said this to you when we were tossing up the idea of a podcast. Is that right? And I said,
no, it was when push came to shove. So it was when money was required. So this is me hitting all of my limiting beliefs around, because the podcast for us back then, I mean, back then it wasn't really not even a thing in Australia. Like you and I were obsessed with American podcasts. Like we would catch up at.
There was a handful of Australian ones. Really, there were not many.
Or hardly any, yeah. And we would catch up weekly at our play group and we would have like D&Ms about the latest podcast, and which I know some people do with our podcasts. I know that there's groups of mums that will get together and dissect what's happened in the podcast this week and how it's relevant to them. And that's what we were doing. So it was such a fun learning in my brain, learning thing that we were always like, yeah, one day we'll podcast. That'll be so fun. And then you were like, well, I've got us a spot on the podcast, on the wellness couch, and we can start like next week, and it's this much money per week. And at the time you were working corporate and I wasn't working. I had a little baby, 3 babies on a single wage, and we were stretched. Like Nick was probably earning 80,000 back then. So single wage of 80,000. And I was like, there's no possibility. Like I can't even, like there's more month than money as it is. And so the confronting idea of, well, if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way, was so, it took me a really long time. Well, I actually think in hindsight it was that long because my whole body was screaming yes, and my mind was screaming, I don't know how the fuck you're going to do this. You will be eating baked beans for a week to make it happen.
I now reflect on that and go, was that a little insensitive of me to like make that statement, particularly in the context of like, you know, feeling so stretched. Like I now go, oh, that wasn't very aware, was it?
But I just think, I mean, I don't judge. I actually don't judge that. I hope that's not what you're getting from what I'm saying is, but when
now I'm thinking, because I'm kind of like, I'm now at the like, it's funny because I've kind of flipped because I've pulled myself out of like that gravy train of like money that I used to splash in right back then with one child and, you know, 2 really good incomes to be now with 3 children and my like not as good income. And then go, oh, I can really feel how that would have like felt like a bit of a pinch, right? Like to have that statement made.
Right. Except that also it's true.
Yeah. And I also have my foot in like that camp too, because
right.
Like money goes wherever your values are. So if you like value this enough, if you want it bad enough, it's about making that a higher priority.
You'll find a way, right?
Whatever else is.
And I would say, but this is why I'm saying this, because when you ask me what is the most memorable memory over 7 years, I mean, we've had profound conversations and moments of streaming tears and cracks of heart opened, inspiration and all of that. But the moment that still to this day holds the most meaning for me is still that memory, is the moment I said yes.
Yeah.
Without knowing how I was going to do it, without having a financial plan. And I would say you back that up with, I like came back to you going, I just like literally Bridge, I can't even, how do I get $100 together in a month? I can't even work that out. I wasn't working back then as I had little lols. I can't even. And you were like, okay, just give me like, we worked out something. I don't even know. Was it like 2 months or 3 months? And you were like, pay what you can. I'll fill in the gap. And you will find a way. Like there was also just this really strong driving force for me that was like, of course we're doing this.
Yeah.
And there's a way, like, how can you? Not we can't. And you'll work it out. Like just this solid belief. This wasn't a gravy train.
Yeah, I remember there was no part of me that didn't think that we were going to be able to do it or that you would be able to pull through. Like there was no part of me. So I was like, we're just doing it. And I'll just carry you initially and then it'll figure itself out. Like,
right. But I didn't have that certainty, right? Like when I think about it, it was like, I think the reason I still like, we never hold on to unmeaningful memories, right?
Yeah.
So I still hold on to this memory in like hypercolor, like in my own mind, it's hypercolor. And I think that's because I'm still sucking juice out of it.
Well, it must have been a really defining, like even like just different, it put you on a different money track maybe as well. Like it just kind of like was a bit of a piercing of like.
Totally.
Different reality.
Totally. Right. And I think that's why. So when I think about our 7 years, what could bring me to the ground in tears of gratitude would be that moment. And the only reason that moment happened was because you, my loving friend, like how often do mothers save your life? Like over and over 1,000 times. And here was this mother, this woman, this friend who saw a reality that no one else saw, who believed in me and a path when even I couldn't see it or feel it, and who helped me say yes. And it changed my life. You know, like that's the moment I remember was the moment I said yes to you.
Yeah.
Shit scared and unsure and bewildered. And it was the moment that changed my life.
You know, another moment when I had that complete certainty that you'd nail it or it'd be fine was when you told me that you were pregnant with Gwen.
Yes, you did.
And I was like, fine. I know so many amazing entrepreneurs for children. You're going to like, this is good. This is going to be fine. Like I was like, you know.
I remember that. Yeah. And you were like, but Julie, this is the making of everything that you want. And I'm like, it's not. It's the end.
Yeah, gosh. I remember where I was when we had that conversation too in my backyard. I have lots of profound conversations, life-altering conversations walking around my backyard. What was it for me? God. I just feel like there's so many interwoven themes throughout this podcast that I almost kind of can't put my finger on which ones feel most profound. I know that there's some that we've recorded and you and I afterwards have just felt like, well, that was a therapy session for myself.
100%. Yeah.
I definitely remember like when I think we recorded a podcast and like Sylvie was like 7 days old and she was sleeping on my chest or something. And we recorded a podcast. Yeah, in the car.
Yeah, I remember
we used to record a lot of podcasts.
We used to record in the car.
Yeah, because it works as a great sound booth.
And it was the only place that we could like lock ourselves into without kids.
Yeah. And this was, you know, like we really only started to record on Zoom in separate places when the pandemic hit. So for the first 4.5 years, nearly 5 years, we would always meet and do every podcast together. So,
and we often picked inspiring places. Like we would podcast in our car overlooking the beach. We would podcast in our car at the sculpture park. We would, you know, like
yes, we would because we would choose somewhere that we felt like would give us like the
vibes.
Yeah. And that's amazing to think of all of those different rendezvous points we've come to. Like, where are we going to record today? And it would be like a little adventure.
Yeah, every week.
Yeah,
right.
And so replenishing too. Like, and I can remember where we were when we did like one of those earliest podcasts, which I think was on the spiritual vagina. Yeah. And you know, because some of the podcasts also ended up being like, you know, quasi kind of book reviews as well. I think that was when you'd read.
Yeah, it was Vagina by Naomi. Yeah.
And now that we're talking about it, there's just so many like just and you know, recording. I remember sitting here in tears listening to like Shelley and Katie's miscarriage stories, right? So like we can just place ourselves in so many spots. I remember sitting out the front of our house one time recording something on the conscious parenting, and you know, really like you and us hashing out like, you know, how like dark do we want to go with this as well, right? Like because because we don't pre-plan our content a lot, it really comes out of conversation, and you know, sometimes it goes places we didn't even know we were going to go to, and that I think is where the therapy ends up for us, and no doubt for many of our listeners. And I love that. I love that it's raw. I love that the fact that like my daughter's now, you can't hear her anymore because she's fallen asleep in my lap. And I love that we can, you know, you and I just say, okay, because I was going to let you just record something tonight. You're like, oh, what if we just like do this? We talk about what it's like, you know, to podcast and parent. And it's about essentially, how do we just make this work? Much like my point to you initially, we're just going to make this work if you want it bad enough. Same thing with showing up every week. We're just going to make this work. And sometimes it'll be, we don't know what to talk about. You know, if one of us has had a horrible day. Yeah. But I think in that too, there's so much humility and so much opportunity for other mothers to see themselves in, because it's not like we're coming here all polished with like the 411 on everything. Like we come here with our wounds sometimes. Yeah. And I think I love that.
I love that too. And I have always, you and I have always quested for like, show me the people who are doing business the way that we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's brutally hard to find.
It is because so much of it is a clear separation between business and family, or business and mothering, and then there's not a lot of knitting of the two or overlapping of the two. Whereas you and I never felt that we wanted to take away from our value in mothering and family in doing business. So it was always, how can this work together?
Yeah. Right. And that has meant doing it imperfectly, doing it late at night, early in the morning, in baby naps, with kids on our lap or at our breast, or, you know, I mean, 1,000 different ways we've done it. I just love how you wrapped that round to, if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. And just like me in that beginning conversation with you, Bridge, I love that you just said, and podcasting is the same, because it totally is. We've just gone, we don't know how, but we'll work it out.
And And what that requires of you too is to be in the tension point long enough. And this is so similar to relationships. It's like being in the tension of the not knowing or not having an answer, or, you know, staying longer than like your window of tolerance for that intensity, whether that intensity looks like, oh gosh, my child's pulling at me, or oh gosh, I can feel my partner frustrated, or oh gosh, there's this other pressure. Staying in the tension long enough to be willing to find a way.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's the two of us, there's an energetic holding that happens to keep both of us longer in that tension.
Yeah.
Which then creates the potential.
Right. And I always think the beautiful thing about doing it with a friend is that we have always had this symbiotic relationship, that when one of us is a bit flat, the other one carries, and it's a beautiful dance. And then next time you can guarantee that wave rolls and it flips again. And the other person's down and the other person's carrying it. So it's always had this, well, in my perception, you tell me if you perceive it differently, this just symbiotic relationship that has allowed us, or it feels like the universe has co-created with us for it to be possible, which I think is just another way of saying you want it bad enough, everything will work out.
Yeah. And then I think too, when you're showing up to it in the integrity that, you know, that is, this is what I deeply value, this is what I want to bring to the world, this is what's lighting me up, that with that core piece, it makes possible, you know, more of the impossible, right? Like that you and I find a way, because even at the end of our shit show day, we want to weave wisdom from that. And so because we want that, and even underneath all the parts of us that can't be bothered, or that feel tired, or that think, oh gosh, I've got a sick kid, and how am I going to do this? There's something higher that says, create this, keep creating this, keep serving with this. And that feels nourishing.
Yeah, it feels really nourishing, doesn't it? This is something that I find enormously interesting, is that when, I mean, you and I have said this before too, that true alignment really would be where work is your life and life is your work.
Yeah.
And we have often said that Nourishing the Mother for us was the birthplace of us really working out that weaving.
Yeah.
Was, oh, right. Like they're so intertwined. They just continuously feed each other.
That's when you know that you're in an alignment, right? When it's not taking away from you. Like, you know, you and I can, I'm sure, recount hundreds of episodes where we've been like getting together at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It's now 8:30 p.m. here, right? And we're like dog tired. And then we start talking about something and we're like, it's like we've just woken up for the day, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And so then it's like, am I tired, or had I just not hit my, like, you know, true energy source here?
Right. Because actually your work and service in the world can be, and I think is, part of your well-being.
Yes. Yeah. So what if it's not, you know, you're working too much, or like, but really you're working on things that are low value to you, or you're working on things that, you know, your spirit is not feeling like you're singing a song to.
Right. Exactly.
This podcast is brought to you by the offers we currently have on in our world. So over at bridgetwood.life, you can find out more about the Reimagining Motherhood membership. It's the place where conscious parenting and the whole woman collide to empower you in motherhood. And you, Jules?
Over at julietenner.love is the online couples workshop experience. It's 12 dates that you join from the comfort of your bedroom or lounge room, cameras off, guided by me over a 12-month experience. So one date at the beginning of each month that inspires the support and the change that you can create in the rest of your month. So it's a set it and forget it healthcare system for your relationship. You can find out more at julietenner.love. So, you know, I mean, I would love for us just to be like, look, the realness of doing this with kids has been that it's always been messy. and the advice that we would give for other mums that maybe listen to this or that have followed our journey or see us and go, ooh, they can do it. So surely it's possible for me. And our answer, of course, is going to be, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But the question always has to be, how can it be? Not it's not, or one day when.
And also being willing to just create and allow it to be imperfect. Because when you have little people, you can't spend, inordinate amounts of time making everything perfect.
No, that's right.
Right? Like your time is too valuable for that. You can't lose yourself in, pages and pages of business plans, or I don't know, pick your like business 101 thing that you perceive you have to do, or podcasting 101 thing that you perceive you have to do. If you value mothering, that's going to trump it. So can you allow yourself to accept that? Like we have had to allow ourselves to accept the fact that sometimes the audio isn't perfect on this podcast. And sometimes, there's interruptions, but we hope that in that imperfection, there's permission. Because like modern motherhood is so, so many women are collapsing under the weight of it because of this intense, perceived intense pressure to have everything nailed, right? And there's an anxiety that comes with that. It can be all-consuming. But what if it didn't have to be perfect? And what if you showing up with your imperfectness was a sigh of relief and a breath that allows another woman to see, the extraordinary in her ordinary, because she's no longer striving for the impossible? Isn't that a gift?
Yeah, I totally think it's a gift. I think just as it's a gift to see real bodies on social media, so is it a gift to see real lives, just real women trying to work this shit out. And it's not perfectly worked out before it's, before you're allowed to see it, that it's just like, this is what it is. And I'm so cool with myself that I don't need it to be anything different.
Yeah. And even allowing your work for the world to more form and allow it to find its kind of like solid ground as you're creating and serving from it. I mean, that's also what you and I have done, because where we began 7 years ago is not where you and I have both landed in the way that we work now.
No.
But we've allowed that to be a creative process of tuning in and testing and learning and falling and getting up again, but having at the center of it that desire to be of service and that desire to leave people feeling more whole and connected than where they began.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've got to have a why that goes beyond you, because life will get hard and there'll be times you don't want to do it, and there'll be times that it falls flat or lands in your face, and you have to decide whether this is important enough, the why is big enough to go beyond, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So please don't feel like there's boundaries or constraints when you enter the world of how do I do my work in the world and still show up as the mum that I want to be, because we don't perceive that they have to be such hard and fast rules. Is it more challenging than, look, I don't even know that it is. I was about to say, I do think it's harder to try and do everything rather than a clear division between I'm this or I'm that. But I don't know, because I see women who have the division of this and that, and I don't perceive that it's any easier. So I think you just choose your hard, right? I think you choose your hard, because what that might have ease in terms of clear delineation, of like lines and responsibilities, where the hard becomes is identity, is like, how do I fully immerse and allow myself to be in both of these things? That's, I think, a really big struggle for many mothers. Well, and not beholden to them, because even I witness with my husband who works a corporate job, and I've obviously created this job that is totally around my children and their needs. And sometimes I can find myself getting very resentful because it means that I'm parenting, housekeeping, head cook, all of the things, and then I'm working when everything else is done.
Yeah.
And for him, he can't do that. He's expected to work his 40 hours a week or whatever it is, and he logs on at this time and he logs off at that time, and that he's available, the end. And part of me is like, man, this is bullshit, because I can't do that. I don't have the freedom to do that because there's no one else after me. But if I move myself out of my wounded child it just wants to be seen and acknowledged and have a little tanty, what I can see is the genius in the fact that I have created a life of utter flexibility in alignment with whatever I want it to be. I think there's very few people who can say that.
Yeah.
My husband might
because you can tilt it. You can tilt it. So you've got a child who's got a sporting thing on. You've got an appointment you want to be at. You don't have to ask anyone's permission.
No, I just shift it. I want to do that thing. I don't want to do that thing. Well, I do it and I don't do it. I want to be home and have a nothing day. I'm home and have a nothing day. I want to hang out in my pajamas and be with my kids all day. I hang out in my pajamas and be with my kids all day. My husband doesn't have that flexibility. He has a boss and a system that he answers to, that he has to be accountable for, and there is no flexibility in that. And that's as much a cage where you feel like you don't have freedom of choice as where I'm perceiving that exists in my world, when it actually it's not even true, right? I can manipulate it constantly.
And I mean, like, similar to how our podcast has asked us to show up like rain, hail or shine, right? I do think a lot about like how you do that, how you have two adults working very systemized jobs with the very nature of a very unpredictable nature that is raising children, right? They get sick, they have these things pop up, and that yet you're still trying to fit yourself into these very structured, defined systems of working that don't allow a lot of flexibility. Like the very gift that is being able to create and serve outside that is that it totally then for us ticks our top value of mothering, because we're not having to sacrifice anything.
Yeah. So I just think if you can conceive of it, you can create it, because you and I, Bridgie, both went, how do we do this? There's got to be a way. We couldn't see anyone in front of us who would stop work in order to be with emotions, or who knew how to navigate children, or who could be child development focused while building who they were in the world and what they wished to do in the world. We couldn't see that in front of us. We didn't have a blueprint. You and I have said often, gee, we really wish we had had us back then.
Yeah. I've often thought of myself in the depths of like, I don't think it was P&D. I think it was essentially just that complete cataclysmic shattering of identity on top of lack of sleep and not enough fun. But that if I had had us in my ears, then so much more of it would have made sense.
Yeah, that's what I often think too. And yet still, without a blueprint, without a path, without being able to see it, we both went, there has to be a way. We'll work it out. And it's been messy.
Yeah.
Right? Nourishing the Mother has taught us every business lesson conceivable, I would say.
Yeah. And it's been a training ground.
Yeah, right. And we've allowed ourselves to show up, as you say so beautifully, imperfectly with kids. They're sick, they have needs. And because we're authentic with who we are, and because we are always coming from a place of self-compassion and living in alignment with your top values and cherishing who you are and the service that you have to give the world, we have attracted like-minded women clients. Yeah. So when we say to them, I can't show up on tonight's live because one of my kids are sick or they need me to blah, 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 but I'm going to do it at this point. They're like, yeah, of course. Like with blessings and love, go do that.
Yeah.
I also don't know other places where there's that level of respect for life integrity.
Yeah. And for mothering And for you prioritizing that.
Yeah. So I also love the fact that we have created a beacon of light for women just like us. And in doing so, have created that central pillar of what was self-compassion and compassion for our children has become a central theme with our clients. Like, how beautiful is that?
It's so awesome.
I'm grateful all of the time for the fact that we have such a hub of like-minded humans who live in this world just striving for the compassion that we all wish to see our children met with.
Yeah.
And when we grace it to ourselves and we grace it to each other, we create that world, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's so beautiful. I almost imagine it like what that must look like as an energy, if you could map that, like the particles and the wave function, like of how that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Almost like the honeys to the bees to the honey, and like the way that happens. It's happening as we speak, right? We speak and then it happens.
Yeah.
And it's profound.
It is. So the real deal, what 7 years of podcasting with kids looks like, I think we've got more esoteric than anything else in here. If you have specific questions, we would love to answer them for you. But where we really wanted to be was just like, hey, it doesn't matter. We just show up as we are with sick kids and without personal space, because that's how it is sometimes. But that doesn't need to mean that we can't show up wholly and completely as who we are, honoring the light that we receive and beam out when we do that thing that we're here to do. So you can do it if you find a way, but you've got to be willing to be creative. You've got to be willing to pivot. You've got to be willing for it to be imperfect, because you do not have the time to make it perfect.
Yeah.
When you're in motherhood, it's like 20-minute chunks, right? You don't have time. Do it, get it out, do it, get it out, do it, done, move on.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself has been such a wonderful teach for us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no post I write that would take me more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, because you just have to get it out. There's no.
I've trained that. And somebody, how long? Oh God, my content takes me an hour and a half. I'm like, what? I wait for the right energy and I just like, boom, write it in 5 minutes. Why is it taking you an hour and a half?
Yeah. And I think
we train that.
I think you train it. And also I think you just, and this is part of training your creativity. It's like when it's alive and you create it.
Yeah.
Just
create the bubble around it. Do it.
Just go.
Yeah.
You have the idea, do it. Write it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because in 15 minutes time, that won't be here. And the speed of light that you would be able to get it done in will disappear.
Yeah.
So 100% do it. Let it be creative. You don't have to have a knowing goal, like an end goal, a perfect plan, a how. You just have to have a trust that I will work it out. And it's just one step at a time. And when I hit a block, I'll work that out. And it's one step at a time. And that is literally how we've ended up here every week for 7 years on the podcast. Like, that's profound.
It's huge. And we're coming close to 1 million downloads. So that's a lot of people listening over that time too. So if you've been, I know that we recently mentioned this coming up and we had some beautiful comments from long-time listeners and recent listeners. So if you have been listened to one or more episodes over that time, we are super grateful to have the privilege to be in your ears in this season of your life. And yeah, we feel, I think, constantly, reflect on what that means to shape a woman or to have an impact on a woman at such a profound time in her life.
Well said.
So, Jules, what's coming up for you?
Well, Queen School will be opening soon, so I can't quite tell you about that just yet, but that will be releasing soon, so you can keep an eye out for it at julietenner.love in all the places. And you, Bridget? Yeah,
so I am just launching Reimagining Motherhood. We're about to dive into 4 months of unpacking the pillars of Reimagining Motherhood, essentially. So really excited to be be dropping that and to be really, like, I guess, marinating in these principles that I've really come to form mostly over the past 7 years, but essentially crystallizing in the last 6 to 12 months. So that feels really good to be really sinking my teeth into what that looks and feels like. So we're diving into that in the group this month or next month. And so if you want to find out more about that, you can go to bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman, to walk with the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.